Hello again, I'm Steve Kime with the City of Enid, and welcome again to our show, Ask the Candidate. My special guest today here at the Enid Television Network is Senator Eddie Fields, representing District 10. Is Eddie, can I call you Eddie?
Yes,
As a
sir.
Senator, we'll give
fine.
you all the accolades that
Yeah.
you deserve. So, well, Senator, again, thank you for being here in Enid today. And you are a candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Just at the outset here, just remind people your role as a senator in District 10. What's that all about?
Okay, so State Senate District 10 is Osage and Kay counties. Been in that role for 8 years. I served 2 years in the House before moving to the State Senate in 2010. But as a state senator, I represent roughly 77,000 men, women, and children in north central Oklahoma. I'm the Assistant Majority Floor Leader for the Senate. I am the Vice Chair of Appropriations of the Senate Appropriations Committee. Also serve on the Energy Committee, Education Committees, Chairman of the Rules Committee, and I'm the Chair of the Sub-Appropes Committee on Natural Resources and Regulatory Services. And so as that, I'm kind of the voice for agriculture when we talk about ag issues and natural resources. So that's kind of my expertise.
Well, with that background, it's a great lead into my next question. Doesn't look like you have any time to be a senator because you're always in meetings. You're always
Yes.
chairing a variety of meetings. Well, as your role as Senator of District 10, how has that prepared you, in your opinion, to serve as Lieutenant Governor?
Well, having served in the legislature for 10 years and knowing what the issues are, what every issue that every Oklahoman's facing, whatever community you live in, you know, is it education policy, is it public safety, corrections, public health? So having the relationships with House and Senate members, and one of my roles as Lieutenant Governor would be to continue to be a part of the legislative process and the appropriations process, and making sure if there's an issue in, say, education, get people in the room to sit down and say, okay, let's get with our House and Senate members and come up with a solution to that problem and moving the state forward. You know, the 4 roles the Lieutenant Governor has today is he is the President of the Senate, can break ties on the floor. He serves as the Chairman of the Tourism Board. He sits on the Board of Equalization, and then he sits on multiple boards and commissions as well, and is the small business advocate on the Governor's Cabinet for small businesses. So being the voice of the people of Oklahoma and continue to make sure we try to find solutions to the problems that Oklahomans face today.
Senator Fields, let's kind of shift gears a little bit and get away from the role of senator and talk a little bit more about you as that individual. Now, I've been in northeastern Oklahoma, kind of familiar with Washington, Osage, and those counties, and then the counties that you represent, Kay and Osage. With your background in ranching, cattle ranching, things of this nature, how does that tie into your role to support the role as Lieutenant Governor?
Well, coming from a rural area in Osage County and a ranching background, our population centers now are Tulsa and Oklahoma City, but we still have a large population that are ag producers in the state of Oklahoma and the rural parts of the state, and kind of look and see what's happened in Pawhuska with a Pioneer Woman the last several years. I think there's one of those in every small rural community across the state of Oklahoma. Agritourism, I think, is a vital role that has not been really expanded upon in the state of Oklahoma yet. I think we're on the cusp of getting there, and what Reed Drummond has been able to do in Pawhuska and for Osage County and for the state of Oklahoma is kind of put us on the map, so to speak, as a tourist destination. And one of the roles as Lieutenant Governor, being from a rural part of the state, is tourism. You know, tourism is our 3rd or 4th largest industry in the state of Oklahoma today, roughly $650 million of outside money that comes into this state every year that goes through tourism. And so being from a rural background, being from a ranching background, understanding the issues that a lot of our ag producers face across the state of Oklahoma, small rural communities, the issues they face, whether it's in public safety or public health or education, that small rural farming, ranching background, I think I have a good pulse of what rural Oklahomans crave, what they're looking for, and trying to find solutions to solve those problems.
I jokingly remind some of the viewers that when I was hauling hay in August in a hay barn, I realized that was not my future.
Right.
But it was very character building, so I can see how this would tie into that. Well, when you get in your car and drive from Guyman to Hugo, you realize that Oklahoma's a pretty good sized state.
Yes.
Or Altus to Dewey, Oklahoma, Miami, Oklahoma. So, as Lieutenant Governor, how would you go about garnering, say, input from individuals, from Oklahomans, from all 77 counties?
Well, one of the things, as a role as Lieutenant Governor, you've got to be visible, you've got to be seen, and you've got to be interactive with the citizens of Oklahoma. You know, that's what Todd Lamb has been able to do the last several years, visit all 77 counties. I would continue that role as Lieutenant Governor. Get out and visit with the citizens, you know, visit with the small business owners. What are the issues you're facing today? Is it workers' compensation reform, or is it some of the red tape that you find at the Capitol, you know, and red tape that needs to be kind of diced up at Oklahoma City, to make sure that every Oklahoman has the opportunity to pursue their dream and goals from a small business standpoint. Whether it's town hall meetings, whether it's social media, whatever the means might be, but get Oklahomans engaged and active in the process to make sure their voices are heard, that we can find solutions to the problems that all Oklahomans face. They're all somewhat similar, just a little bit different depending on where you live in the state of Oklahoma. You know, if you're from Broken Bow, that's more of a tourist destination.
Sure. Versus
when you're in Guymon or in Boise City, Oklahoma, that's more agriculture and farming. And so from that standpoint, same set of issues, but just a different perspective on what those two corners, opposite corners of the state face.
You mentioned the word goals just a moment ago, which ties into the next question. Can you be a little bit, or not necessarily more specific, but just kind of share with us your goals as Lieutenant Governor?
My goal as Lieutenant Governor, I want to be the voice for the people of Oklahoma. You know, and there's the four kind of specified roles the Lieutenant Governor has today. It's in the Constitution, but I want to continue to be part of the legislative process and continue to be part of the appropriations process to make sure if there's a funding issue, say in education, you know, having those relationships with our House and Senate members, having served in both bodies, get them to the table. And there's a lot of smart people across the state of Oklahoma who will never put their name on a ballot. How do we get them engaged in the legislative process? Get them to the table. So if there's a public education policy issue that we need to have solved, get those public educators sitting at the table with our House and Senate members. Let's have the conversation to come up with a plan to meet the goal and solve the problem. And I want to be that conduit between the citizens of Oklahoma and our elected officials, because a lot of time our elected officials, having served for 10 years, you just don't have time to sit down and have a conversation with your constituents. When you're constantly in meetings, and
sure.
You know, and then when the teacher walkout we had this year for 9 days, we tried to do business as usual, but when you've got teachers that, you know, consume about 2 or 3 hours of your time trying to have conversations about education policy, how do we get them to get focused on real issues within education? Let's sit down at the table and have a conversation with our House and Senate members from their respective areas of the state to solve those problems.
Oklahoma has an interesting political history, and from time to time you'll see a photograph of the governors getting together. Mm-hmm. It may be for a nonprofit cause or something like that, but you'll see from George and I up to Governor Mary Fallin, mm-hmm. and everybody in between at a particular event. If you become Lieutenant Governor, my question is, do you plan on interacting with former Lieutenant Governors to find out what worked, what didn't work, or just basically developing more of a relationship with them?
Oh yeah, of course, and I think, you know, I have a really good relationship with Governor Nye, Governor Fallin. From that standpoint, try not to let history repeat itself, and that's, you know, visit with those lieutenant governors that have served as governors as well. Jerry Askins, you know, got a good working relationship with her as well. You know, and she's working for the state Supreme Court now, you know, on criminal justice reform, and so having those conversations with them and get them engaged to give me insight, say, you know, what's the pitfalls out there, what can I do to better myself to be Lieutenant Governor and to solve some of those policy issues, you know, that maybe haven't been addressed yet, or maybe we need to make some tweaks to those particular issues. But yes, I would seek their active input, you know, and what can we do to make sure I don't go down the wrong path, but to keep me kind of on the straight and narrow.
Thank you for joining us today on Ask the Candidate. My special guest, Senator Eddie Fields, representing District 10, which includes Osage and Kay counties, as a candidate for Lieutenant Governor. And we'll have more questions for Senator Fields right after this. Thanks for staying with us. Welcome back to Ask the Candidate. My special guest today, Senator Eddie Fields, representing Osage and Kay Counties, District 10 here in the state of Oklahoma. I want to remind everybody that the primary is coming up in June. That is June 26th. Of course, that's a Tuesday, so keep that in mind. Encourage people to get out and vote. Senator Fields, according to America's Health Ranking, Oklahoma ranks about 45th in the health category. We may be number one in gymnastics and some other things as well. It seems like 45th in the overall health category, and we kind of make light of that, but it's not a topic to dismiss. Smoking is down according to statistics in Oklahoma, but as Lieutenant Governor, what would you do to say improve the health of Oklahomans?
Well, one, I think is, we need to look at, access to health care, I think is a big issue from that standpoint. Kind of where we live in Osage County, we don't have any EMS service. We're kind of in a dead zone because we're between two providers. But I think telemedicine, with the technology that we have today, and what OSU Medical School has done, and somewhat OU has done as well, is trying to be able to reach out to these small rural communities with telemedicine. Having a PA and a mobile unit, and being able to go in and visit with, and see homebound senior citizens, and those from that standpoint. The one thing that did come up this year that we found out last November is that, our GME, which is Graduate Medical Education, which is our residency programs at OU and our OSU medical schools, became in jeopardy. We've been getting federal funding for that since '95. We lost that money, and that's and those residency programs are a 3-year program, and so based on the revenue growth we had this year, based on some policies we did a couple of years ago in the legislature, we had enough revenue growth to cover that cost of about $110 million for fiscal year 19, starting July 1 of this year. So after fiscal year 19, it's about a $62 million cost, but at least we got the short-term fix for the two medical schools, because those are those residencies are 3 years programs, and they're training our specialty doctors at OU, they're training our rural doctors at OSU Tulsa. That was a healthcare crisis waiting to happen if we wouldn't address that. We got that taken care of, and so, but back to your question on, the ranking of 45th, we got to invest more in healthcare and creating more access to healthcare for Oklahomans. If you just kind of look at the dynamics of our economy today, is that, when we became a state in 1907, our biggest driving force was manufacturing and agriculture. People were out actively working. Today we are a service-based economy, so we're sitting at a desk or sitting in a cubicle. We don't get near as much exercise as we did back when we first became a state. So it's kind of a two-part solution, I think, is we got to educate the population of Oklahoma. We got to get re-engaged in being healthy, being fit and exercising, and access to health care, and that's one of the issues we had this year, and we looked at that a little bit through the TSET funding, the Tobacco Settlement Fund, how to take part of those proceeds to go help address some of the health care needs we have in the state of Oklahoma.
Senator Fields, in preparation for our visit today, looking at your bio on your page, your Senate page, I guess you would call that, notice that you had served on the school board for some time. The question is, how do you manage your time where you're able to give back to the community?
That's a good question. Served on the school board 14 years, and my dad served on for 30 years, and that was one of the things that was instilled by my parents and my grandparents both. It said, give something back to your community and your state and your country. And you got to prioritize your time to be able to do that. You got to give up some family time to do that. I did that serving on the board 14 years, and I've done that for 10 years. Last 10 years, serving as a state legislator, you miss a lot of family events because you're trying to provide a better outcome and a better good for all Oklahomans. You're trying to, I have 3 daughters, try to provide the best I can for them, but it's also a calling of a public service is to provide every Oklahoman the same opportunities as I've enjoyed myself, and I've tried to provide for my daughters as well.
Well, Enid's own son, Todd Lamb, Lieutenant Governor, visits us quite often, and we're very tuned to his Small Business Day event at the state capitol. As Lieutenant Governor, is that something that you would continue? And if so, what would you do to enhance Small Business Day at the Capitol?
Oh, I most definitely. I've attended it several times over the last 10 years in the legislature. From that standpoint, the Small Business Day at the Capitol. How to expand that? I think we need to go back and kind of look at some of our small mom and pop operations across the state. How do we get them engaged in the process? I've had a lot of issues in my district alone. You know, people saying, well, the Department of Health has said this, and we need to do that, and some of that red tape, you know, so to speak. How do we get them engaged, you know, to make sure that they are meeting those requirements from the Department of Health? How do we get them engaged? You know, is there stuff out there today that is keeping a small entrepreneur wanting to open a business? Is there any regulations or red tape that's keeping them from getting in and starting that business? And so just to continue to have the dialogue, you know, I think Todd Lamb has done a great job being the small business advocate for the state of Oklahoma the last 8 years. Just look how can we expand on that. I don't know if I have all the answers to that yet, but I think we do need to continue that conversation, because we have a lot more of our young adults that, you know, are not going to go out and be in the corporate world, but they're wanting to go out on their own and create their own business and their own lifestyle, and we need to continue to have that conversation.
Senator Fields, in our conversation today, you've touched on the diversity of Oklahoma and the workforce, if you will, from tourism to agriculture and every spot in between. What would you do as Lieutenant Governor to really, I guess, enhance the economic development engine of the state?
Well, you know,
in 20 words or less.
In 20 words or less.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, we need to broaden our business portfolio for the state of Oklahoma. That's the 20 words or less version. But how do we do that? You know, when we had the oil crash of the 80s, you know, it's about 1 in every 5 jobs related to the energy sector.
Right.
Today, it's about 1 in every 15. And because what we've been able to do in healthcare sector and aerospace, we've been able to go from 1 in 5 to 1 in 15. We need to get that to about 1 in every 50 jobs tied to the energy sector. With energy being our #1 economic driver, aerospace #2, agriculture #3, tourism #4, and our military installations across the state, and those civilian contracts with DOD, that's our 5th biggest economic driver in the state of Oklahoma. How do we broaden each one of those footprints in economic diversity within the energy sector, the aerospace, agriculture, tourism, and the civilian contracts with DOD? And I think the last 10 years, I think we put some stuff in place legislatively to broaden that business portfolio. How do we continue to have the conversation to expand that, so when our commodity prices, energy and ag, crater on us, we can not have so many of those valleys in our economy, and keep more of a stable economy for the whole state? Because, you know, where I live in Osage County, you know, when we had the crash of the oil and gas industry, it took a devastating hit to Osage County. How do we level that playing field out? And it's job diversification, and, you know, to do that, you're going to have a highly educated workforce to do so.
Senator, when various candidates running for various offices here this year have visited the Enid Television Network studio, I've always asked them what they would do for the state and so forth. But I also included this question as well. It kind of turns the tables just a little bit. And basically, what would you want Oklahomans, or encourage Oklahomans to do to just really enhance the state in every aspect?
Well, one is be actively involved. And that's one of the things my parents taught me growing up, is read the newspaper, you know, be engaged, know what's going on in your state, in our country, and in the world. Because when I was growing up, and perfect example is, you know, in agriculture, you know, is basically what was affecting here in Oklahoma and the U.S. And then when I got older, my dad said, we got to start paying to South America what they're doing in their wheat and their grain production down there. Had an effect on the wheat producers in Oklahoma and the U.S. And so now we got to pay attention globally, what we got to do. But get them engaged in the process, whatever that process might be, whether it's the political process, get engaged. The one thing you know, when we had the teacher walkout this year, you know, I said, please don't make the same mistake that occurred 28 years ago. After Governor Bellman signed House Bill 1017, teachers became out of sight, out of mind. Don't let history repeat itself. Stay engaged in the process. Stay in contact with your House member and your Senate member. Tell them, let them know what the issues are in your public school system, wherever it might be. because we can't let history repeat itself again, because it took us 28 years to get where we are this year. We can't wait another 28 years to continue to have that conversation. But ask all Oklahomans to be engaged, be involved. You know, whether it's at the local level in Enid or in the state level, you know, in state politics, be engaged. You know, try to make a difference. And that was the work ethic I was instilled by my parents and grandparents. Be involved, ask the tough questions, and be engaged.
Senator, during our visit today, you've touched on the topic of education twice, about 9 days of trying to work and meet with constituents and so forth. So can you just kind of share with us your views, your observations, if you will, on the education crisis? I'm calling it education crisis. Maybe you call it something else. Your views.
Well, we're in an education crisis, and you know, and so much of our economy is tied to oil and gas and agriculture, a commodity-based driven economy. When those two commodity-based driven economies crash, so does the amount of money we have as a state collects to be able to disperse back to all of our state agencies. And we tried to hold Common Ed as harmless as possible. We were not able to do that for several years. Higher Ed took a really big cut 3 years ago. We're just kind of now start backfilling of that a little bit, because you look at our economy today, we're on the rebound. We're going to probably this year, we'll probably put in about $300 million in the rainy day fund deposit this fall. But on education, we need to continue to have the conversation about how do we get more money in the classroom for teachers. Let the teachers teach the kids. And for so many years, we've had some legislators that I've served with have kind of taken a paintbrush and said every student's the same and every school district's the same. Well, they're not. Having served on a board, and my wife being a fourth grade teacher, not every student's the same, not every school district's the same. We got to give some local control back to our locally elected boards and administrators to make those decisions, how they best use those dollars that the state gives. One of the things that we kind of caught my attention this year is, you know, out of $2.9 billion budget that we did this year for in Senate Bill 1600 for common education, about 2.4 of that is just pass-through money from the state to SDE to local school districts, and that covers their salaries, that covers their health benefits, and that covers anything that's statutorily required so third grade reading sufficiency and some of those other things that we're asking school teachers to do and local boards to do at the local level. It's all pass-through money. And so from that standpoint, how do we continue to move the education needle forward and not backward, and not be stalemate either, you know, to give more funds to the classroom. And one of the things we had during the walkout, you know, I had a lot of teachers from Jinx and Union and Owasso say, well, they won't replace a desk, or they won't fix the tiles in the ceiling, or fix the bathrooms. Well, those teachers were misinformed, because that's local revenue dollars. It's not state money that we give to the school districts to do that. That's all your local general revenue funds, either property taxes or anything that they collect at the local level. Fund those things to pay for those things. And in my mind, I think we've seen a dynamic shift. This is not an Oklahoma thing, but this is a U.S. problem as a whole. Is we will take our model, our education model from the 50s and 60s that we're currently operating in today. Has been taken by countries in Europe and Asia, and are beating us at our own game, because we value athletics more in this country today than we do academics. Because when you go look at those Asian countries and those European countries, they have athletics, but they are not school athletics. Those are athletics that are paid for 100% by the parents after school. And so much, and when you go look at some of these larger school districts across the state, and especially eastern Oklahoma, the Owassos, the Jinx, the Unions, and the Broken Arrows that are spending millions and millions of dollars on athletic facilities, but they won't pass a bond issue to put a smart board in the classroom or put a Chromebook in a student's hands. They have the means to do that, but those boards have chosen to spend money on athletics, not academics. And public education first priority is to educate the kids. Now, I'm not against athletics. My three girls have played basketball. They judged it. They judged an FFA. They show cattle. But that makes a well-rounded student. But if we cannot teach them the basics, education principles, we have failed as parents. We failed as a state to do so.
Thank you for your comments. Well, Senator, this is the time when the candidates come by to visit with me that I give them that platform, that opportunity to kind of summarize everything. And it's basically, I call it the time where you can talk to the folks, you know, if we can use that word. But if you would, just look at that particular camera, and this is your opportunity for you and your closing remarks.
Well, thank you. As Lieutenant Governor, I want to be the voice of the people of Oklahoma, that's citizens, and having served in the legislature for 10 years, bring those people together, be the voice, that conduit, and saying if there's an issue in public education, public safety, corrections, whatever the issue might be, healthcare, get those House and Senate members to sit down at the table and have a frank discussion and conversation how we fix the problems. I believe every Oklahoman has the same dream as I do and my daughters have, and that's to chase the American dream. And what the American dream is to live in a white two-story house with a white picket fence around it and to live happily ever after. I want to make sure every Oklahoman has the opportunity to chase their dream and to reach their goals. And as Lieutenant Governor, I want to be a voice of Oklahomans. This campaign is not about me, it's not about my opponents, but this is about for Oklahomans and what's best for Oklahomans in moving this state forward, whatever the venue might be, whether it's in public education, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in public safety, whatever the issue might be, is I want to be that voice for Oklahomans moving the state forward. And would humbly ask for your vote on June 26th in the Republican primary for Lieutenant Governor. And thank you.
Senator Eddie Fields, thank you for coming to Enid, Oklahoma today and share with us your thoughts. Appreciate that.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us today on Ask the Candidate. Again, our special guest, Senator Eddie Fields, representing District 10, which is Kay in Osage County, as a candidate for Lieutenant Governor. And as the Senator said, circle June 26th on your calendar. That is the primary date, and we encourage you to get out and vote. Again, thank you for watching us here on Ask the Candidate. I'm Steve Kime with the City of Enid. Until next time, make it a great day.